Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much for joining me on my GB News show this morning. Lovely to see you. So you addressed the International Democracy Union Conference in America, in Washington, in fact, where you said this: "I believe my party lost because it spent a lot of time talking right but governing left." Are you in danger, though, of talking down your party too much to the electorate?
No. I think it is important that we acknowledge where we went wrong. Pretending that we didn't lose or that the electorate was wrong, in my view, would not be how we win back the public's trust. When I stood for party leader, I said the first thing we needed to do was to show that we could be trusted again. So not just making new promises or throwing out new policies, but explaining to the public where we went wrong, but not just where we went wrong, but why things went wrong. Because if you don't look at the why, you'll repeat the same mistakes. And that's what that speech was drawing out, why things are going wrong.
The GB News audience will think that you went wrong in 3 specific areas. You went wrong on tax because the tax burden became the biggest since the Second World War, and they appreciate COVID's role in that, but they will think it was distinctly unconservative. They'll think that you went wrong in your net zero pledges, which are now coming back to bite us all, not least with the closure of the car plant at the Vauxhall car plant in Luton. But predominantly, they will say that you went wrong on immigration. And that's why you have struggled at Prime Minister's questions to tackle Keir Starmer on immigration, because everybody knows that this was 14 years of Tory failure.
So let's start off with net zero. You will remember that when the net zero pledges were announced, I was one of only 2 MPs who actually said, what are we doing? Where is the plan? We believe that we need to make sure we give a good environment for the next generation, but that needs to be done in a way that doesn't bankrupt the country. And one of the things that people know I did was fight in government to hold back many of the plans, which even business and others were saying, yes, it's fine, we'll do this, we'll just get stuff from China. And I think that shows how I think about things. I tell people that I'm an engineer, you've got to have a proper plan, not just make promises and then hope things will work themselves out later. On tax, as you mentioned, yes, we had COVID, but we are also spending so much more. And there's a difficult conversation to be had about what the state needs to spend money on. It's not just about public services. And we also saw what happened a couple of years ago when Liz Truss tried to remove taxes without removing, to reduce taxes without reducing spending. Those are some of the things that we're going to be working on over the next few years. But on immigration, I'm not going to run away from the subject of immigration. I never have. Labour are pretending that they're tough on immigration when actually they stopped us from doing quite a lot of things. It wasn't just the fact that we had a majority in the Commons. We did not have a majority in the Lords. So a lot of legislation, the Rwanda legislation, even when we were putting it through, it was getting blocked elsewhere. So I'm not going to have Keir Starmer, who wanted foreign criminals to stay in this country, actively stop them from being deported, pretend that he is Mr. Immigration. Yes, we got things wrong. We tried to deliver a points-based system when we left the EU. We tried to deliver a points-based system. It clearly did not work. So let's fix that. But we were not the ones making all of those applications, but we were not keeping an eye on the ball. And that is where I will say that we got things wrong. But we are the only party that understands why this system is broken. And so we are the only party that can fix immigration.
Because the trouble was, I think John Reid back in the day when he was a Labour Home Secretary said that the Home Office was a basket case. And even post that, you know, the rest of the Labour administration into successive Conservative governments. I appreciate what you're saying about stopping the boats and indeed the deterrent that the Rwanda plan may well have been. But it's the concern about legal migration. We've seen it even this week with Labour addressing the housing shortage with the pledge of 1.5 million homes. The GB audience feels terribly let down by the Conservatives not keeping a lid on legal migration. Those pledges, tens of thousands, everyone remembers it from David Cameron onwards. So it's how are you going to manoeuvre the Tories out of that? Because you can't attack Labour on legal migration. You're as bad as they are.
I'm afraid that is not true. Yes, we can. And that is by pointing to people all the things that we did do that did make a difference. I'm not here to say that everything worked out, but I need to make sure that people know the truth about what actually happened. When we were cracking down on migration, do you remember people attacking Theresa May about the go-home vans? Do you remember them attacking her about the hostile environment? When we were being very serious, people got spooked. The problem we have is that when anyone actually tries to manage migration, they get attacked. And that spooks a lot of people, some politicians, not me, I'm not worried about that. A lot of people in the Home Office, you see them even putting on their message boards that they don't want to do this. A Director General from the Home Office left to go work for Amnesty International, to help asylum seekers. That's great, but that's charity work. That's not controlling borders work. And that is why I keep telling people that we are the only party who has seen the system from the inside and understand how to fix it. Labour don't want to fix it. Reform can't fix it. They don't know how. Goodness knows what the Lib Dems are thinking.
We'll get on to reform in a moment. You have moved, I think, during the leadership campaign, you didn't want to go as far as to say that you wanted to put a cap on migration, but you are now saying that. Is that an accurate representation?
Yes, what I said during the leadership contest, that a cap on its own is not enough, that numbers matter. So yes, a cap, but culture matters more. Who is coming into the country? How are we integrating them? How are we making sure that the people who come to this country care about it? This is not a hostel. It's not a dormitory. This is our home. And then making sure that the leadership follows through. So a cap is something that we can do. What I don't do is just make random promises without explaining where it's all going to come from. So I said that a cap will be needed, but what was that cap going to be? Let's work out what we can sustain. We're going to need to have a very systemic review. How many homes should we be building? What makes sense? What is happening to our population? Where do we need skills? And make sure that migration is controlled. Where the points-based system went wrong was that we thought by putting in those points, it would be fine. I campaigned, in fact, in 2018, before we left the EU, where we couldn't manage our borders, that let's have skilled migration and not cap that, because that's what my constituents were telling me. The businesses in my constituency said, we can't get high-skilled people, can you help? And I did that. But when we saw that it wasn't working, I said, no, this is not good enough. We've got to do better. Let's change things. Let's start talking about what the courts are doing. So we can do a lot on immigration if we're given the chance. But the first thing we need to do is earn trust. And that is why, no matter how tough it is, I will make sure that I hold the Prime Minister to account on immigration at PMQs. We are the opposition, and we've got a job to do. And I'm going to make sure that we do that job.
So you don't want to put the number on the cap now?
Well, what would that number mean?
Well, you tell me.
Exactly.
Well, let's use a comparison, because the OBR and the IFS seem to be baking in this idea that legal migration can remain at around 350,000 a year. We saw that record high in the end of 2023, up to 950,000, which I think everybody can agree is way, way too high. But that base number seems to be creeping up and up.
Exactly.
So is 350,000 too many?
So what I'm saying is that we need to work out what the country can sustain and where people are coming from. If we start saying, oh, well, we'll just do tens of thousands, like David Cameron said in 2010, and then it doesn't work out, people think that we are being dishonest. Let's explain where the number comes from. Let's explain why. And that is work that needs to be done. No one ever does this work. Even the OBR, where it's picking its figures from, that's not a serious systemic analysis of what to do.
What does your gut tell you about 350,000?
My gut tells me that immigration right now is too high. My gut tells me that immigration even 10 years ago is probably too high with no integration strategy. But we are living in an era of global mass migration. It is not just the UK. I've been to Italy. I've been to Australia. I've been to the US, Germany. Everybody is having these problems. We have to think about how we deal with this new world problem. This problem did not start because of Conservatives. It's happening everywhere. We were in government when it started. We've got to figure it out. Otherwise, we will lose control completely. And I do not want to see that happen. I will do everything I can to make sure that that does not happen.
One dividing line between you and your former opponent, Robert Jenrick, was that he said he wanted to commit to leaving the ECHR, and you said you wanted to have a further think about it. Where are you on that right now?
So I have said that leaving the ECHR is not a silver bullet. We need to remember that we've just had a historic defeat. Labour has almost 4 times as many MPs as we do. They have a supermajority. It doesn't matter what policies we rush out with now. Even if 100 Labour MPs disappeared, they would still be in government. That is the reality. So me talking about what we'll do now when we haven't done our homework is not realistic. I keep telling people I'm an engineer. If you want a plan, you don't just talk, you build, you think, you analyze, and then people can see how it comes together. So on the ECHR, I've said that it alone will not fix anything. If we leave the ECHR today, we're still not going to be deporting people. You've got to deal with the personnel problem. You look at Labour, you look at Keir Starmer, there are people like that all over this country. They're not going to man the borders. Let's get new people in who want to do this job. There's a lot of thinking to be done, and that's what I'm going to be doing over the next few years.
You can accept for the GB audience that it's more attractive, if you're really concerned about immigration, to look at Nigel Farage promising net zero migration with exceptions for healthcare and other key sectors, and departing from the ECHR on day one.
What I would say to GB News viewers is, aren't you tired of people who just make promises without telling you how they're going to get them, if I may, without telling you how they're going to get them done? I remember watching clips of Nigel Farage saying that he wanted to see more immigration from Africa, wanted to see more immigration from India. He's not saying that anymore. If he was an MP, there'd be clips of him saying these things. We are people who are serious. When we make mistakes, we acknowledge them. Labour pretends it doesn't make mistakes. Mr. Farage is talking, but he does not have the experience. We do. So what I'm saying to your viewers is there is only one party that has the experience, that knows what went wrong and knows how to solve this, and that's the Conservatives.
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look, and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this. It's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
We will get on to Farage and reform again a bit later, but tell me about your trip to the US. So you also met with Conservative former leaders, including former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. You met with Pierre Poilievre, who is hoping to defeat Justin Trudeau at the next election in Canada. You also met with Vice President-elect JD Vance. What kind of conversations did you have with them?
So Tony Abbott, I've known for a while, and he actually endorsed me in the run-up to in the leadership contest. And he was talking about bringing back more authentic conservatism. He is a net zero skeptic, as am I. I know that climate change is happening. I believe that we need to look after our environment. I am suspicious of the net zero plans that Ed Miliband has. I even thought our plans were going too far. Thankfully, we were able to row back on that. So we talked a lot about that. Pierre Poilievre, I thought, was amazing. He is so impressive, and he is about 4 years ahead of me in terms of where he is in the electoral cycle. He is the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, but he's in opposition, and he is part of what I see as a new generation of Conservatives who are coming forwards. We're not the past. We've taken our principles from, previous Conservatives, but we need to mold those principles for the age that we're in. The world is changing. And that's the conversation that I had at dinner with JD Vance, who he was messaging me during our election, and I was doing the same, about how people don't understand how the world is changing. And we often have, a lot of media commentary about, Kamala Harris is going to win, and, your opponent is going to win. People talking you down without actually looking at what you're saying. Conservatives constantly being caricatured. And I want to make sure that people understand what it is that we're about, what we believe in, because if you vote for a party, it's got to be because there's an emotional connection, not just because of promises. People need to know that you are for them. And that's what I'm offering right now. The Conservative Party is under new leadership. And what I'm doing is showing that we are based on principles that the rest of the country shares. Belief in freedom, in genuine citizenship, not just passport citizenship, in the importance of family, in equality under the law, not dividing people into groups, and all of this left-wing nonsense that we see. And I'm going to keep pushing that.
Have you had a conversation yet with Donald Trump?
No.
And, well, how would you like to develop that relationship with the man who's going to be president for the second time come January?
Well, I'm quite excited about what a Trump presidency will bring. I'm someone who's been writing endlessly about how we are becoming more bureaucratic as a country. rather than entrepreneurial. I've written papers, I've given speeches on this, and Doge is basically what I have been talking about. Javier Milei in Argentina also has this thesis that the Western world has just become bogged down in compliance and bureaucracy. So it'll be interesting to see how President Trump gets on with Doge and with those plans, because that's what I want to do. It's what I've always wanted to do, even as business secretary, when I put out papers on smarter regulation and I cut, audit regulations. These are things that we can do in order to get our economy booming again.
Now, with that guise, and in that guise of being former business secretary and trade secretary, do you think that it is possible for the UK and the US to strike a trade deal? How could that work?
Well, we are entering CPTPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Deal with Asian countries, but also Canada, Mexico, Australia. And it's going to be amazing. We should be striking more free trade agreements. We have one with the EU. It is working well, but the US would be the big prize. And when Boris Johnson was prime minister, we had been negotiating. We were halfway through negotiations when Boris Johnson and President Trump were both running the respective countries. When Biden came in, that got scrapped. So we had to put those plans on the shelf. Right now, with a new Trump presidency, what Keir Starmer should be doing is chasing that US free trade agreement, and we will certainly be pushing for that.
And do you not worry that that might be a further blow to British farmers who might be worried about the import of much cheaper American meat? We know they're already on their knees. We saw them at the tractor protest again this week in Westminster. It could be a blow if Conservatives don't seem to be standing up for people working in the British countryside.
We will always stand up for farmers. And actually, if you look at the CPTPP deal, which I negotiated, the NFU said this is a great deal. Because it's not just about food coming in, it's also about the ability to export our food more cheaply. If you have tariffs, then you can't sell your food abroad. And we need to be able to make sure that we get our food into the markets across the world because it's of the highest quality. The key thing is to make sure that you sign a deal that works for both countries, not one that is lopsided. And I think that only Conservatives will do that. There is a lot that we can share. Trade deals are mostly about services these days rather than just goods. We are an 80% services economy. That's where a lot of our growth will come from. But we will always protect British farmers. I have said that we're going to reverse the family farms tax. I think that it is important that people understand why farmers are special. They really are. There's no other job like this. You don't just find farmers at the job center. Once they go, it's very, very difficult to bring back what it is that's been lost.
Some of the farmers were upset that you didn't mention their plight at PMQs this week. They were in Parliament at the time. They could hear what was going on. Equally, have you ceded sort of the argument in favour of farmers to Nigel Farage? He's in the middle of it all in his wellies. Jeremy Clarkson's also been a poster boy for the farmers. That should be your role, shouldn't it?
Yes, but I was on the stage at the first rally with Jeremy Clarkson, and everybody wrote about that. I've also mentioned farmers at every other PMQs. So just this once, when people said, oh, why isn't she talking about immigration? I talked about immigration, and people said, why aren't you talking about farmers? You only get 6 questions at PMQs. And I wanted to make sure that Keir Starmer understood that if he wants to talk about immigration and attack us, I will drag his record out so that people can see that he was on the side of criminals, not the people of the United Kingdom. And one of the other things is that the farming campaign is not yet over. There's a lot more that we will be doing because these are constituencies which we have always supported and which we always will.
How are you finding PMQs?
It's very different from being on the other side. I'm used to answering questions. So asking questions for me is limiting. I want to ask more and more. And what was really interesting about my conversation with Pierre Poilievre was that he does Prime Minister's questions as well, because the Canadian system is like ours. But he gets 24 questions, and it's just him rather than all the backbenchers. I said, I'd love 24. And he said, I couldn't do anything with just 6 questions, that you're just getting going with 6 questions. So it's a tricky thing to do, to make sure that you can tell a story with 6 questions. But what I want at PMQs is for people to understand the difference between Conservatives and Labour. For too long, people didn't understand what the difference between us was. I think that was wrong. We are very different parties, and it is time that the British public understood what real, authentic conservatism looks like.
Are you taking the fight to Starmer enough? Only because some people have remarked in conservative circles, you've got this reputation for being a bit of a street fighter. You've said yourself you're extremely direct. And is there a sense to which you're slightly playing Queensberry rules across the dispatch box and you could be a bit more aggressive? Not least because, let's be honest, the Prime Minister's been on the ropes for some time.
Yes, he has been on the ropes. But I need to make sure that I am building the case for Conservatives. People think I like a fight. I don't like a fight, but I will defend our values. I am somebody who fights for other people. I speak up for others. I don't just rush out attacking for attacking's sake. And, if you look at the questions that we've asked, it's about all of those business that are being crushed by the national insurance charges. It is about farmers, who we've just spoken about. It's about pensioners who are suffering under what Rachel Reeves has done with her budget, taking away winter fuel. So I fight for people. I don't just attack Starmer for attacking sake. I think we need to make sure that we show whose side we're on, not just turn it into an argy-bargy.
But are you in danger of being in a kind of sandwich, goodness me, what a way to describe it, between Keir Starmer and indeed Nigel Farage? Reform have seemed to have the momentum lately, pardon the expression, because that's associated with left-wing Labour politics. But you've had the defection of Tim Montgomery, the founder of Con Home, somebody that you and I are both very familiar with in right-wing circles. You've had the defection of Nick Candy, who has got quite a few bob. He's going to now donate to Reform rather than the Conservatives. You've got Elon Musk, the ex and Tesla owner, talking about maybe giving $100 million to Reform. And you've got Nigel Farage, very, very prominent on social media. He's just clocked up, I think, his millionth TikTok supporter. Dame Andrea Jenkins has gone across. There's talk about Suella Braverman, or at least her husband, following. The momentum does seem to be with Reform and not the Tories. And people are talking about the Tories facing this existential crisis.
Right. So let's take each of those in turn. Tim Montgomery has left the party before. He left in 2016. You talked about Nick Candy. He defected to Labour in February and has now gone to Reform. Technically, he's a Labour defection. Andrea Jenkins, I'm sure if you've seen comments that she'd made, they were very personal about me. So I think it's just a personality decision. She just doesn't like who the leader is. I'm who I'm always going to be, and I'm very proud of who I am. But we need to remember that I've been in charge for 5 weeks. And we are taking a party that has been in government for 14 years. It's going to take time. The assumption that after 14 years, we're just going to, just put a lick of paint on it and say, ta-da, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a long slog. I am here for the long haul. I'm not here just to make a few quick speeches and throw gimmicks out. People won't believe it. People need to know that they can trust us. And what they want to see is someone being a credible and effective opposition, making sure that I'm standing up for Conservative values and those people, farmers, pensioners, small businessmen, all those people who've been hurt by Labour's budget, but also rebuilding our institution. I am about the institution of the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage is an individual personality. He doesn't even have a membership organisation.
They're saying they've got 100,000 members now, and that they might overtake the Tories.
They say that, but what can they do as members? My members have a say. They're part of the organisation. I have to look after them. They're not my fan club. They are people that I have a responsibility to. We are a serious institution. Yes, we have come out of a historic defeat. We're going to have to pick ourselves up. But that's not going to happen in 5 weeks or 5 months. It's going to take the full time in opposition.
Final question. You said in your speech to the IDU that there's no cavalry coming, there's just us. David Frost has talked about the need for the right to unite. Because if Reform and the Tories don't come to some kind of deal or pact eventually, you know what's going to happen. Labour will ride on through the middle and win a second term in office, which nobody on the right wants. So further down the track, I appreciate this is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't conversations need to be taking place between the Tories and Reform?
Well, I think it is important that you ensure that your identity is very clear. We have had a period where even within the Conservative Party, there has been a lot of disagreement. These are the things that I'm working through. You can see that we're more united than ever. But when you have had internal disagreement, the first thing you don't do is bring in a whole other bunch of people and say, well, why don't we merge with them? And also, the public want to know what they're voting for. There are a lot of people who vote Conservative who will not vote Conservative if we merge with Reform. We need to be the very best Conservative Party not trying to nick bits of here or there. In the same way that I wouldn't be talking to Ed Davey and saying, well, there's some people who vote Lib Dem who might vote Conservative, why don't we merge? I wouldn't do the same with Nigel Farage. I haven't been elected as leader of the Conservative Party to do a deal with Nigel Farage. I have been elected as the leader to fix this Conservative Party and get us back to where we were as the champion of Conservative values, and that's what I'm going to do.